Since heading down to David Warner's press conference the other day, I've been thinking a lot about retirement in cricket. Although that is not at all how this press conference started.
There's only one person wearing shorts.
The conversation was typically very David Warner. He went out of his way to not say anything too full on about Stuart Broad, but also couldn't help but adding this.
Well, I haven't really worked on that yet. I'm concentrating on the World Test Championship final first. Yeah. So Mohammad Shami and Siraj and Shardul Thakur is probably on my mind first. Yeah. That's what's important to us right now, and then I'll switch on and worry about Stuart Broad if they select him first test this time.
This is a very David Warner thing to do. He was basically answering the question very truthfully. Of course he is thinking about the Indian attack first, but he still mentions that Broad may not get picked because he's David Warner and that's what he wants to do. He was also asked about Broad's utterly stupid comments about the last Ashes series not counting.
We all played through COVID. We all had the same conditions. I think he said something about no one played a test match away, but at the end of the day, we still spent close to 90, 100 days away from our home bed. He might get a little bit homesick and he can't cope with playing under those circumstances, but we've all played Ashes series away. It's the same irrelevant of what you got. You had a golf course there. That's what they do. They like playing golf. They had a great resort. We had the same facilities. So, yeah, look, that's his opinion. For me, it's, I don't worry about that stuff.
What I like about this is the needless dig at Broad getting homesick and then suggesting that they could play golf. So how on earth could they be unhappy? But the press conference really turned when Warner was asked about retirement plans. Now, this is always the worst question to ask a player, because in their eyes, as a journalist, you are either saying that they are old or that they are finished, or more than likely you are saying both. But Warner answered this one properly. In fact, he was far more clear on it than he's ever been before.
I've always said that the World Cup would probably be my final game, but I think, I probably owe it to myself and my family. If I can score runs here, continue to play back in Australia, I can definitely say I won't be playing that West Indies series. So I think if I get through this and I can make the Pakistan series, I'll definitely finish up then.
Now, there is a lot in this. For one, he has picked the SCG as his last test match, which is a very Australian thing to do. And he's also calling it 9 tests before it happens, which is also a remarkably Australian thing to do. But at times he also made it sound like the ODI World Cup may be his last time playing in white ball cricket for Australia. And he actually said even more on this.
It looked very daunting. Whether or not you're going to play this test match before the series, given that there's a World Cup as well, we'll go to South Africa as well, and then you got cricket on the back end of the World Cup in India. So leading into a home summer, it's going to be exhausting.
That sounds like a man who has read his schedule for the year and is thinking, well, I can just about do all of that this year. But a World Cup next year in June, that might be too far away. And I clearly wasn't the only one thinking this, but luckily Scott Bailey had a chance to ask the last question so we can get some clarification.
I think I've heard you say before that next year's T20 World Cup was potentially your exit point from T20 cricket. So does that suggest that after this summer, that's not an option anymore for now? You're looking at ODI as your end of white ball cricket, and then this summer is it for Test cricket?
Look, I want to play that 2024 World Cup. It is something that is on the back end of my mind, but we've got a lot of cricket before that, and then I think it stops from February. So for me, then I have to play obviously IPL, some of the other franchise leagues, and then get into that rhythm to play in that. I think it's in June, so there will be a bit of cricket around to play. Who knows? I might go back and probably play a Shield game for New South Wales.
Might have to finish up.
Okay.
Very good.
All good?
Yeah.
No worries.
Thanks.
Right. So he is still planning on playing in the World T20 and maybe even a Shield game, although I think we can leave that one alone for the moment. The T20 World Cup is in a year's time, and who knows what can happen to his game or the Australian cricket in that time. They might find another opener. My guess is they probably won't find 2 players to open who are better than him, and even so, he's still probably going to be in the squad. But that's a separate argument right now. The main thing about all this is how complicated modern cricket is. I mean, it took several journalist questions to actually work out exactly where he was retiring, when he was retiring, and what format he was discussing at any one time. That's how complicated our modern game is. But in some ways, for modern times, Warner's retirement is fairly straightforward. Within the space of 8 months, he'll be stepping away from all 3 major international formats. And the reason that he's doing it within those 8 months is because he has 2 World Cups and also the World Test Championship final and the Ashes as well. Like, it's a very good end to a very good career. But Warner is still retiring by installments. He's carefully choosing his last game in each one. Probably in the World Cup cases, he'll be hoping to take some silverware in those last games, while also being very honest that his form and the selectors have to allow him to do all that. But even when Warner does all this, let's say best case scenario, he plays in the World Cup final in the ODI and he wins that, and then he plays against Pakistan at the SCG and wins that test, then somehow ends up in the Caribbean for the World T20 and Australia win that. Everything happens to him. He still actually hasn't retired from all cricket, right? There's still another level that he needs to retire from, because those are just his first 3 rungs of retirement. He would still have to retire from T20 after that as well. In fact, if you are an all-format player, there are now probably 4 and maybe even 5 levels of retirement you might have to consider. It is no longer a case of just moving on from international cricket, but of which kind of international cricket you may not want to play into the future. Then you have to decide on your T20 franchise retirement, knowing that there's probably always going to be some level of franchise cricket out there who are willing to throw you money, especially if you're a big-name player. And then if you're an all-format player, you might also have a first-class retirement because county cricket might still be calling. We saw Morne Morkel and Graham Smith and Ricky Ponting all head there when they were late in their careers. So that is 5 different levels of retirement that any player has to go through. And let's be honest, retiring from professional sport is probably one of the toughest decisions any of these guys will ever have to make. They are basically giving up on the chance to ever earn that kind of money again. They are choosing to go back into normal human society, and I can tell you lots of stories about players really struggling when they give up cricket and have to just, do things for themselves, often for the first time ever. And they're often making all these choices while trying to work out how much pain is worth one last paycheck. I mean, they're usually retiring because it's their bodies that won't allow it anymore. But then on top of that, to add all these different layers. I mean, I would never have said before today that David Warner is like an onion. In fact, he's pretty transparently exactly who he is at all times. But in this retirement period, he's having to peel off a part of his game one layer at a time. Until he's done, and there's no more cricket, and it's just him in his house making social videos with his family.